Manes, and outagamis. She made them taciturn and beady-eyed and lithe and fleet, and every other adjectival thing her imagination and history book could supply. The fat and placid Capuchin fathers on the hill became Jesuits, sinister, silent, powerful, with France and the Church of Rome behind them. From the shelter of that big oak would step Nicolet the Brave, first among Wisconsin explorers, and last to receive the credit for his hardihood. Jean Nicolet! She loved the sound of it. And with him was La Salle, straight and slim and elegant, and surely wearing ruffles and plumes and sword, even in a canoe. And Tonty, his Indian friend and fellow adventurer. Tonty of the satins and velvets, graceful, tactful, poised, a shadowy figure, his menacing iron hand, so feared by the ignorant savages, encased always in a glove. Surely a perfumed slap, a rude shove that jerked her head back sharply and sent her forward stumbling, and jarred her like a fall. "Yah, Tag, you're it. Fanny's it." Indians, priests, cavaliers, coureurs de bois, all vanished. Fanny would stand a moment, blinking stupidly. The next moment she was running as fleetly as the best of the boys, in savage pursuit of one of her companions, in the tag game. She was a strange mixture of tomboy and bookworm, which was a mercifully kind arrangement for both body and mind. The spiritual side of her was groping and staggering and feeling its way about as does that of any little girl whose mind is exceptionally active, and whose mother is unusually busy. It was on the Day of Atonement, known in Hebrew as Yom Kippur, in the year following her father's death, that side of her performed a rather interesting handspring. Fanny Brandeis had never been allowed to fast on this, the greatest and most solemn of Jewish holy days. Molly Brandeis's modern side refused to countenance the practice of withholding food from any child for 24 hours. So it was in the face of disapproval that Fanny, making deep inroads into the steak and fried sweet potatoes at supper on the eve of the Day of Atonement, announced her intention of fasting from that meal to supper on the following evening. She had just passed her plate for a third helping of potatoes. Theodore, one lap behind her in the race, had entered his objection. "Well, for land's sake," he protested, "I guess you're not the only one who likes sweet potatoes." Fanny applied a generous dab of butter to an already buttery morsel, and chewed it with an air of conscious virtue. "I've got to eat a lot. This is the last bite I'll have till tomorrow night." "What's that?" exclaimed Mrs. Brandeis sharply. "Yes, it is," hooted Theodore. Fanny went on conscientiously eating as she explained. "Bella Weinberg and I are going to fast all day. We just want to see if we can." "Bet you can't," Theodore said. Mrs. Brandeis regarded her small daughter with a thoughtful gaze. "But that isn't the object in fasting, Fanny, just to see if you can. If you're going to think of food all through the Yom Kippur services—" "I shan't," protested Fanny passionately. "Theodore would, but I won't." "Wouldn't any such thing," denied Theodore. "But if I'm going to play a violin solo during the memorial service, I guess I've got to eat my regular meals." Theodore sometimes played at temple on special occasions. The little congregation, listening to the throbbing rise and fall of this 15-year-old boy's violin playing, realized vaguely that here was something disturbingly, harrowingly beautiful. They did not know that they were listening to genius. Molly Brandeis, in her second best dress, walked to temple Yom Kippur Eve, her son at her right side, her daughter at her left. She had made up her mind that she would not let this next day, with its poignantly beautiful service, move her too deeply. It was the first since her husband's death, and Rabbi Thalmann rather prided himself on his rendition of the memorial service that came at 3 in the afternoon. A man of learning, of sweetness, and of gentle wit was Rabbi Thalmann, and unappreciated by his congregation. He stuck to the scriptures for his texts, finding Moses a greater leader than Roosevelt, and the miracle of the burning bush more wonderful than the marvels of 20th century wizardry in electricity. A little man, Rabbi Thalmann, with hands and feet as small and delicate as those of a woman. Fanny found him fascinating to look on, in his rabbinical black broadcloth and his 2 pairs of glasses perched, in reading, upon his small hooked nose. He stood very straight in the pulpit, but on the street you saw that his back was bent just the least bit in the world, or perhaps it was only his student stoop, as he walked along with his eyes on the ground, smoking those tender, dapper, pale brown cigars that looked as if they had been expressly cut and rolled to fit him. The evening service was at 7. The congregation, rustling in silks, was approaching the little temple from all directions. Inside there was a low-toned buzz of conversation. The Brandeis' seat was well toward the rear, as befitted a less prosperous member of the rich little congregation. This enabled them to get a complete picture of the room in its holiday splendor. Fanny drank it in eagerly, her dark eyes soft and luminous. The bare, yellow-varnished wooden pews glowed with the reflection from the chandeliers. The 7-branched candlesticks on either side of the pulpit were entwined with smilax. The red plush curtain that hung in front of the ark on ordinary days, and the red plush pulpit cover too, were replaced by gleaming white satin, edged with gold fringe and finished at the corners with heavy gold tassels. How rich the white satin glistened in the light of the electric candles! Fanny Brandeis loved the lights, and the gleam, and the music, so majestic and solemn, and the sight of the little rabbi, sitting so straight and serious in his high-backed chair, or standing to read from the great Bible. There came to this emotional little Jewess a thrill that was not born of religious fervor at all, I am afraid. The sheer drama of the thing got her. In fact, the thing that she had set herself to do today had in it very little of religion. Mrs. Brandeis had been right about that. It was a test of endurance, as planned. Fanny had never fasted in all her healthy life. She would come home from school to eat formidable stacks of bread and butter, enhanced by brown sugar or grape jelly, and topped off with 3 or 4 apples from the barrel in the cellar. 2 hours later she would attack a supper of fried potatoes and liver, and tea, and peach preserve, and more stacks of bread and butter. Then there were the cherry trees in the back yard, and the berry bushes, not to speak of sundry bags of small hard candies of the jelly bean variety, fitted for quick and secret munching during school. She liked good things to eat, this sturdy little girl, as did her friend, that blonde and creamy person, Bella Weinberg. The 2 girls exchanged meaningful glances during the evening service. The Weinbergs, as befitted their station, sat in the 3rd row at the right, and Bella had to turn around to convey her silent messages to Fanny. The evening service was brief, even to the sermon. Rabbi Thalmann and his congregation would need their strength for tomorrow's trial. The Brandeises walked home through the soft September night, and the children had to use all their Yom Kippur dignity to keep from scuffling through the piled-up drifts of crackling autumn leaves. Theodore went to the cellar and got an apple, which he ate with what Fanny considered an unnecessary amount of scrunching. It was a firm, juicy apple, and it gave forth a cracking sound when his teeth met in its white meat. Fanny, after regarding him with gloomy superiority, went to bed. She had willed to sleep late, for gastronomic reasons, but the mental command disobeyed itself, and she woke early, with a heavy feeling. Early as it was, Molly Brandeis had tiptoed in still earlier to look at her strange little daughter. She sometimes did that on Saturday mornings, when she left early for the store, and Fanny slept late. This morning Fanny's black hair was spread over the pillow as she lay on her back, one arm outflung, the other at her breast. She made a rather startling black and white and scarlet picture as she lay there asleep. Fanny did things very much in that way, too, with broad, vivid, unmistakable splashes of color. Mrs. Brandeis, looking at the black-haired, red-lipped child sleeping there, wondered just how much determination lay back of the broad, white brow. She had said little to Fanny about this feat of fasting, and she told herself that she disapproved of it. But in her heart she wanted the girl to see it through, once attempted. Fanny awoke at 7:30, and her nostrils dilated to that most exquisite, tantalizing and fragrant of smells, the aroma of simmering coffee. It permeated the house. It tickled the senses. It carried with it visions of hot brown breakfast rolls, and eggs, and butter. Fanny loved her breakfast. She turned over now and decided to go to sleep again. But she could not. She got up and dressed slowly and carefully. There was no one to hurry her this morning with the call from the foot of the stairs of, "Fanny, your egg'll get cold." She put on clean, crisp underwear and did her hair expertly. She slipped an all-enveloping pinafore over her head, that the new silk dress might not be crushed before church time. She thought that Theodore would surely have finished his breakfast by this time, but when she came downstairs he was at the table. Not only that, he had just begun his breakfast. An egg, all golden and white and crispy brown at the frilly edges, lay on his plate. Theodore always ate his egg in a mathematical sort of way. He swallowed the white hastily first, because he disliked it, and Mrs. Brandeis insisted that he eat it. Then he would brood a moment over the yolk that lay unmarred and complete, like an amber jewel in the center of his plate. Then he would suddenly plunge his fork into the very heart of the jewel, and it would flow over his plate, mingling with the butter, and he would catch it deftly with little mops of warm, crisp, buttery roll. Fanny passed the breakfast table just as Theodore plunged his fork into the egg yolk.